Good day. My name is Michael Mulondo, and I'm going to cover the subject of social anthropology for the fourth year. And I'm going to cover during this presentation 8 assignments, and which will be a guideline for you that will help you in order to prepare and then also submit your assignments, the 8 assignments for the subject. So the first assignment is going to look at the issue of marriage, and it's going to look at, now normally marriage is between man and woman. Now in the subject social anthropology, you're going to look very critically at the marriage of same sex, whether it's a marriage between a man and a man or a woman and a woman. And then you're going to discuss the same-sex marriage in the context of Namibia, looking at the cultural approach and then also the legal system of Namibia when it comes to same-sex marriages. The second assignment is you're going to cover and discuss the issue of sex and sexuality and how important is sex and sexuality in the human life. And you're going to look this very critically in your assignment. You discuss the differences among the different cultures, the traditional perspective, and then also what they practice when it comes to sex and sexuality. And you might use Namibia as an example. The third assignment is you're going to look at the San and the Himba as a minority group. You will look very closely at what is a minority group and who are the minority group. And the two minority group which we have in Namibia is the San and then also the Himba. So when you're going to look very critically at the minority group, you have to look at are these minority group in an extinction when it comes to the population growth, or are they not in extinction? And if not, then you have to give reasons and practical examples. The fourth assignment is looking again at sex when it comes to certain taboos. You're going to look at the issues of sexual taboos in Namibia. It's almost the same like the assignment 2, but you're going to look very specifically why do people regard sex as a crime and as a bad omen. So this is something that you can look, and you can look at the different taboos of sex and sexuality. Then also you're going to look at the issue of culture. What is culture? How do you identify culture? What role does culture play in a community, in a society? You might discuss that also in detail. Then the sixth assignment, you are going to look at the issue of kinship. What is kinship? Now, one of the famous archaeologists, Lewis Henry Morgan, came up with the concept of kinship, and he was giving different terminologies, explaining what kinship is all about. Now, in your discussion, you are going to look at the different types of kinship and non-kinship based on any social groups that you want to choose. You might choose a specific cultural group or ethnical group in Namibia, and then you're going to discuss what does kinship mean to that specific ethnical group or to that specific cultural group, and you can discuss, of course, with practical examples. Then assignment number 3 is looking at the African culture. What is culture in Africa? What are the beliefs in the African culture? And of course, there are different things that you have, aspects that you have to look at the diffusion, the acculturation, the transculturation of your own culture. And in Namibia, most of us are experiencing or are practicing our own culture, and that's what we call African culture. So discuss that in the light of those 3 concepts: diffusion, acculturation, and the transculturation of your own culture. The last assignment is you're going to look at the concept of family. What is family? You're also going to look at the different issues of kinship, of course, almost like, but you are going to discuss family in details and how that is actually having an impact on a society, and why do society use family as a tool to make an impact or the difference. So it's very important that you also in your assignment discuss this in detail and give practical assignment. So the first assignment is we're going to look at the issue of marriage. What is marriage? Now, marriage is a union which is being recognized by the government as a legal institution, and it's which actually recognize two people as a couple, and marriage has become a legal institution in any government where two people, as I say, have been recognized, and based on this institution, the law of that country, specific in Namibia, recognize those two people, and those two people that are in this marriage relationship are having rights and privileges which is protected by the laws of the country. Now, in your sermon, you have to explain and define what marriage is all about. What is marriage? You might also explain the different rituals, or no, not rituals, the different concepts and beliefs of marriages in every culture, and specifically in Namibia. Then the second part of your assignment, you have to define what is same-sex relationship. Why do people in same-sex relationship, whether it's a man between a man or a woman between a woman, and you also need to discuss in your assignment that in the same-sex relationship is when this couple decide to get married, does the law of the country protect them? And then during this whole discussion, you can also bring it the issue of how does the social structure in Namibia look or view same-sex marriages. And in your whole assignment, you can agree, disagree, and with all your agreement and disagreement, you have to give some practical example. And for this, it will be very good if you can also compare Namibia with other countries, like for example South Africa, where same-sex marriage is legal, and you compare and you're looking at the pros and the cons, the advantage, disadvantage, the disagreements, and of course with all your answer, you have to give practical example what it means, and also give some factual information when you make a reference, for example, to the institution of marriage. So when we look further, is marriage, as I said, is a social, it's a union which is socially accepted. It's a relationship, a bond normally regarded between a man and a woman. It's an institution, and it has been practiced in some countries where you have, or cultures that you have polygamy, where one man can marry with a number of women, or monogamy, where some cultures believe you only need to be married to one man and to one woman. So in your discussion, also bring out the whole concept of marriage and all of these areas which I've meant on, and then the social recognition of marriage, which is very much more important. The second assignment is you're going to look at sex and sexuality. Now, in your assignment, you have to differentiate between sex and sexuality, because sex can also talk about gender. Sex can also mean about intercourse. Sexuality is it's what you believe, what kind of sex you are. It talks about your libido. So you have to explain the difference between the two, the sex and sexuality, and it plays a very important role in our human life. Discuss why it plays a very important role. Now when we look at sex, it goes beyond the act of passion. And it's not just the act of passion, but it's the whole dynamics where the whole person is involved, his mind, body, and spirit. And this is what you can also discuss in your assignment. And then when you talk to sex and sexuality, there are so many other things that surround the subject. There are issues of customs, traditions, beliefs, taboos, spirituality, and so on. You can also bring sex before marriage, sex after marriage, the issue of preserving virginity, until the issues of lobola, male dominance, and the list goes on. So this is what you have to discuss in your assignment as much as possible when you are going to do this assignment. So it goes further, where you also look at the cultural perspective and the traditional practices. when they talk about sex, what do they mean? What is the word sex in the local language? Do they use that word? Is it a taboo to use those words, for an example? And then how does attitudes and belief influence us, or what influences our attitude and beliefs when it comes to this culture? Is it our values, our personal belief, our lack of understanding, and even ignorance? So these are some of the things which you have to discuss in your assignment. Now, assignment number 3 is looking at minority groups in Namibia, and as I said in my presentation, you're going to look at the Himba and the San people in Namibia, and then you're going to look at what rights do they have. Now, minority groups actually imply to people that are actually not individuals that are actually where their rights are being not violated, but threatened by the majority. So you have the minorities, and that you've got the majorities. And as we know that the Himba and the San people are the original citizens of Namibia. Actually, the San is one of the oldest civilizations that we can find in Africa. So it might be in some of the arguments, archaeological arguments do argue that the San people of Namibia is one of the oldest, or maybe the first civilization in the world. So these are some of the things you have to do. But now they have become extinct, they have become minority. So what are the threats that they can face? And this, in your assignment, you have to discuss the threats that they face for extinction, which means that they can be wiped off from the planet of Earth. So these are something that you have to look at and also explain in details. So then, again, assignment 4 and assignment 2, it's almost the same, where you just explore and you look specifically at taboos, which means belief and misbelief that some of the people are having. Now, assignment 5 is look at the issue of culture. What role does culture play in a society, and why is culture very important? What can we learn from culture? What can culture teach us? Now, just a few thoughts on culture is the culture, actually, when we talk about culture, we are looking at certain behavior patterns. We are looking at creative arts. We are looking at the art. We are looking at belief, the institution. Even products that people are using, like painting, pottery, all of them are actually bringing out what culture is. So culture it's a full range of things that we can learn through our behavior. It's when we associate ourselves with other people, or when we are in a specific environment, we behave in a certain way, and that behavior becomes a habit, which forms a pattern. And that's actually what culture is all about. Now, there are different elements that you have to regard, to look into when you're going to discuss this assignment. So the first element that you're going to look at is the whole issue of food and shelter. What kind of food does people eat? Why do they eat the shelter? Why do they live in tents? Why do they live in a wooden house? Why do they live out under the tree? There are so many. Then, of course, the second aspect or element of culture is the whole issue of marriage and kinship. How do the marriage make a culture unique or different? There are a set of practices. And also the artistic expression, why do they have paintings like the sun? People are having the paintings on the rocks. You have the carving of animals and images from wood, for an example, as part of their cultural expression. So this is what you have to bring out. Why do people express themselves in certain way when it comes to culture? And so culture is a very powerful tool, especially when it comes to the survival of a human being. And culture can also be used as a weapon to protect people themselves and what they believe in. So in your assignment, you have to bring out this role, and you can also discuss about culture in the family, schools, churches, and also other institutions, and what role it does play. Now, assignment 6 is looking at kinship. How important is kinship? So now, in any culture, there is always a difference of different sexes. For an example, kinship is looking at the mother and the father, looking at a brother and a sister, a child and a parent. So, and how does a mother and a father relate to each other? How does a brother and a sister relate to each other? So you can discuss in the light of your own culture the role of a child. Now, a child can also be a child that's born from the same mother and father. A child can also be a child that's been raised by someone that acts as a mother. And then some cultures believe that a child is being raised by a village. So the whole village becomes the guardian or the father and the mother of a child. So these are the aspects that you have to discuss in the light of your culture. And it will be very good if you can discuss that in the Namibian context. The other thing is what we call the descriptive terms that are being used. Titles that have been given, for an example, grandmother, grandfather, uncle, aunt, nephew, niece. So what is an uncle in certain culture? What is an aunt? In some culture, there are no such thing as uncle and aunt. There is just a mother and a father. Whether they're extended mother and fathers, there are not such thing as a nephew, niece. Some culture regard nephew, niece as brothers and sister. It's just an extended. So, and in this kinship concept also discuss the whole principle of extended family. How does extended family play a role when it comes to the basic principle of kinship? So in your assignment you have to bring and discuss then also in detail as much as possible in order for when you give the example that you will bring out the importance of kinship. Now, assignment number 7 is looking at the African culture. How is culture in Africa? And now, the African culture, according to archaeologists, is one of the oldest culture, and it dated back almost 10,000 before Christ or BC. So, and there are some beliefs that this civilization actually started in Africa. So there are so many beliefs, and when archaeologists are looking at rock engravings and they are looking at fossils, so there are so many proof that has been given to show that Africa is one of the oldest culture, and its human race can be traced back more than 10,000 years ago. So in your discussion, but you have to bring out those facts and give some factual information. Now, what makes Africa very unique is that Africa is having thousands of tribes, ethnicities and social groups. Now, for an example, if you find in one country that only in one country you find hundreds of different cultures, languages. And also when we look at languages, within languages you have got different dialects within that one language. So in your discussion and in your assignment, bring out those elements of dialects, culture, tradition. And then also when we look at music, you can bring out the issue of music, the traditional music, and history. Why is history or storytelling very important in Africa? And how does the oral tradition or the storytelling preserve the culture of Africa? So these are some of the things that you can also bring up. And why in Africa, when we look at the dances or how Africa dance, that those dances are actually a mode of communication. Discuss that in detail. Why do Africa use dancing as a mode of communication, and what kind of communication messages do they give? When we look at tradition, when we look at arts, creative arts, performing arts, we are looking at crafts. Africa is having one of the richest tradition of arts and culture and crafts. So these are something which you can also look at. And as I say, when you look at certain words that are being used in Africa, especially looking at the African language, there are many words that are being used which actually can be united. When we look at festival, we are looking at celebration. Why is it so important in Africa that certain festivals are more important? Now that's with regard to Africa and the African culture. So then bring those African culture and bring it into your own culture in Namibia. So you can choose any culture, and then you discuss the issue of language, the issue of societal communication, the issue of oral tradition, dancing, arts and craft in your culture, the importance of storytelling in your culture, and then also looking at the customs, morality, what customs do you practice, what moral, so these are some of the things that you can also discuss in your culture. Then which is very important is that in Namibia we've got different festivals. We've got the famous Olafuko festival. We've got so many celebrations, for example. Why do we in Namibia celebrate our culture? Why do we have certain festivals where we go? So these are some of the things that you can look at in Namibia as part of the African culture, and how important is that. Then we look at assignment number 8. Assignment number 8 is just looking at the family. What role does family play? And you can also bring up the concept of kinship. But in kinship, you have, for an example, let's take a household. When you take a household, you've got a father and a mother. Normally, you've got a brother and a sister. Those are a family. So now, how do you explain the role of family in the Namibian context? Because for some people, whoever stays under one roof is regarded as a family. Then you also have what we call extended family. Now, a family is actually a group of people that are affiliated by the same language, affiliated by the same place of residency, affiliated by the same belief, the same thoughts. So these are some of the things where you have to discuss in your assignment, defining what is culture all about. And then, of course, a family plays a very important role. What makes a community? Community it consists of different families, and those different families are actually what makes a community. Now, a community becomes a society, and every society and community are actually made or built by a family. And in your assignment, you have to bring out the importance of a family, and what role does a family play in a society? What role does a family play in a country or in a nation? And what makes and what are the challenges that families are facing in Namibia? And so what are we doing with families that are heading by one parent, for example? We can also look at child-headed household. So is a household a family? And if we say it is a family, what is this household? Then, of course, you're also going to look at the socio-political role of a family, because, as I say, in society, people do play a very important role. So, social role is looking at issues that can actually influence the family itself. We are looking at issues of abuse, issues of unemployment. Political, we are looking at issues of family feud. We are looking at the lack of peace, war. How does war, if war will break out in a nation, how will it influence or affect a family? So these are some of the things that you have to discuss in your assignment as much as possible when you're going to discuss the role of a family. So I hope that this presentation has helped you to prepare yourself for your assignment, and I wish you all the best, and I thank you for listening to me.